Dreams are private realities bubbling up from the deepest waters of the unconsciousness. There's little rhyme or reason to them, often being a jumbled succession of images, ideas, and sensations which might be served up by the dreamer's emotions. Many speculate that those whimsical excursions of flying, falling, shifting geometry, and waking up naked in the classroom are influenced by our real-world experiences. But to what end? It's hard to say with any certainty. There really isn't a scientific consensus on what purpose dreams serve, let alone how they're served. The same can be said of nightmares, its sadistic red-headed twin who loves death metal and Francisco Goya's black paintings. Which is why a dreamscape makes for a perfect survival horror setting. The ultimate expression of fear is fear of the unknown. And in a dream, everything is the unknown. You can't trust your senses, your perceptions betray you. What was once an innocuous and unassuming cottage can abruptly warp into a rust-filled hellmouth. A person's individual fears can be weaponized against them, as the dream is a spatial-temporal construct of the self, drawing from the well of emotions and anxieties cloistered away inside of us. The evil within attempts to explore these ideas. The entirety of its narrative takes place in a virtual reality device called STEM, which has its subjects exploring a dream world constructed from the memories of past emotions and experiences, both pleasant and nightmarish. The purpose of this video is to dissect the components of this narrative scientifically and philosophically, as, believe it or not, both are grounded in real-world counterparts. For instance, while fully immersive dream simulations are confined to the realm of science fiction, there are real-world technologies that can read both dreams and the mind. Jack Gallant, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, has been researching such technology, developing a means of peering into the mind and reproducing what it sees. By using a functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner, Gallant can capture an image of the brain while it's stimulated. How does he stimulate the brain? Interestingly enough, by having test subjects watch films. Why films, you may ask? Well, in an unrelated study about the cortical activity during natural vision, Uri Henson and Raphael Malik of the Hebrew University learned that adults showed peculiar brain activity while watching certain kinds of films, such as thrillers. In the case of this study, Clint Eastwood's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. As it turns out, the brain reacts to these films in a way that's similar to how it behaves during REM sleep, the phase where dreams typically happen during the sleep cycle. The visual cortex, the fusiform gyrus, and the areas related to the processing of touch were all activated. Considering this, Gallant's approach to brain pattern analysis makes sense. His subjects watch a film, and using the fMRI, he scans and creates a model of the subject's visual system. With this, Gallant can reproduce the images the subject has seen with surprising accuracy. Gallant believes that this technology could one day be used to reproduce images from our dreams. Obviously, the veracity of those images would be hard to verify, since only the dreamer ever truly sees the dream. More so, the application of this technology isn't even in utero. And even if it does become a reality, it almost certainly will never reach STEM level of sophistication. But, given enough time and technological refinement, who knows? Cloning was always believed to be a strictly sci-fi concept, but as of today, there's been enough animals cloned to fill out a relatively sizable Wikipedia page, so... STEM is also inspired by something far more commonplace. The space between consciousness and dreams is bridged by a mysterious rabbit hole called lucid dreaming. For those unfamiliar, lucid dreaming is when the sleeper is aware he or she is dreaming and can exert some degree of control over their self-conceived reality. Think of it as having one foot in the consciousness and the other in the dream. It's also incredibly difficult to master unless you're part of that small percentage of people who can do it naturally. Ruvik is STEM's host, exerting complete authority over the system, in the same vein as a lucid dreamer. Strangely enough, the idea of using a device to control a lucid dream isn't outside the realm of possibility. There's actually a cottage industry of technologies and self-help disciplines which claim to increase your chances of having a lucid dream. One notable method is called the Lucid Dreamer, a high-tech sleep mask which works by tracking EEG brainwaves to identify when the wearer has entered the first stage of REM sleep, which then supposedly triggers something called transcranial alternate current stimulation, which in turn enhances gamma activity in the brain and thus delivering you to your lucid dream. Oof, that was a mouthful. I wish I could provide an honest review of the product, but alas, it's only available for pre-order, to which one of the perks is a $300 discount, meaning this gizmo won't be cheap. The Lucid Dreamer isn't the only lucid dreaming device on the market, but it's certainly the most expensive. If you're interested, proceed with caution. While The Evil Within posits technology grounded in real-world science, it also explores philosophical ideas that are just as relevant today as they were when they were first published. Marcelo Jimenez occasionally makes reference to the ghost in the machine idiom, which was introduced by 20th century philosopher Gilbert Ryle. In order to understand it, we first need to know who and what the concept is in response to. The Ghost in the Machine is a critique of René Descartes, a 17th century French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist who believed in a philosophy of mind called substance dualism. The basis of Descartes' ontological position is that the body and the mind are distinct and separable substances, that the mind is an immaterial substance that can affect the body, and that the body is a material substance not capable of thought yet able to affect the mind. These are all ideas which stem from a long string of radical skepticism involving an uncertainty about the nature of reality, a hypothetical evil genius, and a triad of Latin words meant to make sense of it all. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. However, the problem with this is obvious. How can a material body have an immaterial mind inside of it that could do things independent of the physical form? Material things are finite. Immaterial, not so much. So could the immaterial mind leave the material body and latch itself onto other bodies? Descartes' response to the mind-body problem was that the mind interfaced with the body through the pineal gland, a small gland situated between the brain's two hemispheres. He believed that this is the reason the mind could not leave the body all willy-nilly. Why the pineal gland? 1, it was the only part of the brain that wasn't duplicated bilaterally, and 2, that metaphysics and pseudoscience have had a long history with the pineal gland. Being linked to a light-sensing organ known as the parietal eye, it has enjoyed other names as well, such as the pineal eye, or more appropriately, the third eye. Considering this, it should come as no surprise that Descartes would consider the pineal gland to be the seat of the soul. However, his logic is flawed. For one thing, Descartes believed the pineal gland to be unique to humans only, which it isn't. There's also the simple and obvious truth that the pineal gland is still a part of the physical body, and therefore the Cartesian model doesn't really solve the problem. On a side note, the pineal gland does have an effect on how you feel, as it produces hormone melatonin, which determines the quality and duration of your sleep cycle. This ties into The Evil Within thematically, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was referenced in one of Ruvik's experiments. I haven't found that reference myself. The game spreads itself pretty thin in terms of allusions and themes, so I might have just missed it. If you do happen to catch it though, let me know. I'm genuinely curious. Ryle's Ghost in the Machine is a critique of Descartes' substance dualism. Ryle believed that he had mistakenly categorized mental states as being separable from the mind, that mental activities took place parallel to physical actions and vice versa, with the means of those actions being completely unknowable. This would be the equivalent of a car moving by motor spirit, and Ryle considered this to be absurd, so much so that he coined the term ghost in the machine, as if a ghost, something immaterial, could operate a machine, something material. The term took off, and nowadays popular misconceptions of the idiom usually involve the possibility of an artificial intelligence having a soul or consciousness, a la HAL 9000, Blaine the Mono, and of course, the entire crux of Ghost in the Shell. Computer programmers have appropriated as well, using it to explain when programs run contrary to expectations. Try not to think less of Descartes. His substance dualism might have been flawed, but his titular brand of skepticism would have served him well inside of STEM, where empirical beliefs are challenged at every turn and angle. A dream world presenting itself as reality is a deception, and this deception is one that always leads to another, and another, and another. We've all experienced this string of doubts ourselves at some point in our lives. How many times have you had a dream so vivid you swore you were actually awake? And how many times have you woken from that dream, only to find that you were still dreaming? STEM inhabitants know this feeling painfully well. This is an epistemological argument, one whose roots lie in Cartesian skepticism, but is perfectly designed for the brain in a vat thought experiment. Initially thought up by 20th century philosopher Gilbert Harman, the scenario has been reinterpreted by many philosophers. The version I want to examine is Hilary Putnam's, who argues, quote, "Imagine that a human being has been subjected to an operation by an evil scientist. The person's brain has been removed from the body and placed in a vat of nutrients which helps keep the brain alive. The nerve endings have been connected to a computer which causes the person to have the illusion that everything is perfectly normal. There seem to be people, objects, the sky, etc. But really, all the person is experiencing is the result of electronic impulses traveling from the computer to the nerve endings. The computer is so clever that if the person tries to raise his hand, the feedback from the computer will cause him to see and feel the hand being raised. Moreover, by varying the program, the evil scientist can cause the victim to experience or hallucinate any situation or environment the evil scientist wishes. He can also obliterate the memory of the brain operation, so that the victim will seem to himself to have always been in this environment. It can even seem to the victim that he is sitting and reading these very words about the amusing but quite absurd supposition that there is an evil scientist who removes people's brains from their bodies and places them in a vat of nutrients which keep the brains alive. Unquote. If I didn't know any better, I would think that the evil within was designed with this thought experiment in mind. The brain in a vat is very literally represented by Ruvik, whose disembodied brain is kept alive through unholy black science, all to promote STEM, an illusion which fools other people into believing the reality that they are being sold, a reality dictated by an evil scientist. While not one for one, the evil scientist is obviously Mobius, while at the same time also being Ruvik. So, what does this all mean? It's just an extension of an idea that has tormented deep thinkers for thousands of years. The limitations of perception, the idea of a simulated reality. These might be seeing a surge in popularity in recent years with pop culture entries like The Matrix and Vanilla Sky. Hell, it's even gone full-on meme on us. But philosophers have been trying to make heads or tails of its nebulous shape since at least classical antiquity. Plato famously ruminated over the nature of reality and perception with his allegory of the cave, which depicts the world as not being directly perceived, but instead seen through shadows cast from outside of a cave. The inhabitants of the cave watch the shadows dance upon the wall, seeing silhouettes of animals, plants, and people, and eventually becoming convinced that the shadows are the real versions of these things. Then, one day, someone discovers the exit out of the cave and is assailed by the overwhelming scope of reality. Blinding sunlight illuminating a world of seemingly infinite vastness and biodiversity and detail, revealing the complex forms of creatures and shapes he had previously known only as one-dimensional shadows. As Plato puts it, quote, "Previously he had been merely looking at phantoms. Now he is closer to the true nature of being." Unquote. STEM is designed to be much like this. A shadow play of incredible fidelity and sophistication, indistinguishable from what we perceive to be the real world. The version encountered in the first Evil Within never reaches production phase. It's only a prototype, and it's a failure at that. But the intent behind it should have players asking what the nature of their reality is. Where does the line between reality and simulation, between reality and dream, lie? Sadly, the sequel sacrifices that mystery to the altar of narrative accessibility, and it's worse for it. Thankfully, for at least one entry in the series, I felt just as fascinated, just as frustrated, as lost, and as confounded as the man caught in the endless series of nightmares. If the Evil Within excels in one thing, it's definitely that.